It's UofL Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. This is the show about all the cool stuff going on at the University of Louisville. So what have we got on the show today? Well, you often hear about kids getting diagnosed and suffering from asthma at a young age, but you rarely hear about older adults developing asthma. You will today from a UofL doctor. Also, are any of the languages and native tongues of Native American Indian tribes still being spoken and living on today? We'll discuss that with a UofL linguistic anthropologist. We'll tell you what a linguistic anthropologist is, too. But first, the University of Louisville is launching a leadership program on our campus for black men. Ralph Fitzpatrick is the VP for Community Engagement at UofL. Henry Cunningham is the Director of Community Engagement, while Wes Tolbert will be heading up the new program called Campaign for Black Male Achievement. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
All right, who's going to tackle the first one here? What's the Campaign for Black Male Achievement? What is that?
I'll dive in with that. And just the program is called Leaders in Residence Program, and the organization that I work for is the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, based in New York. We were started 10 years ago through benevolence of the Open Society Foundation. Sean Dove is our CEO, and we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And we're doing work to in partnership with the University of Louisville to craft this awesome program that specifically targets to improving the life outcomes of black men and boys.
All right. Ralph, what is the Leaders in Residence program then that UofL is launching here?
Well, our university is excited, Mark, to say the least, to collaborate with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement out of New York and our Metro United Way, who is our local partner, and the launch of this program. This is an ambitious initiative, to say the least, that will provide professional development opportunities for individuals from across the country who have committed their life's work to working with young African-American males to improve, if you will, their chances of being successful in life.
So is this a leadership training program?
This is a leadership training program.
And it's on our campus?
It's on our campus.
And it starts when?
Well, actually, we've already started, Mark.
Didn't know that. Okay.
We've already started. We kicked it off back in March with the first on-site intensive, where we had 10 African-American male leaders from across the country that joined with us here on our campus. We just finished having the first online intensive. So they come to our campus every other month. And then in between, we offer what we call an online intensive or webinar to stay in touch with those individuals. So we're up and running, Mark. We're up and running, and this cohort group will be with us for the next, 16 months?
16 months.
16 months.
16 months. All right. Well, Henry Cunningham, what are these folks going to be doing for 16 months when they come to UofL campus, or we've been doing this stuff online? What are some of the things they're doing, and what are they learning?
Well, there are several topics that we have over the course of the 16 months that they'll be working with us. We will explore such topics as leadership development, for instance. We look at strategic planning, for instance. We look at storytelling, narrative. We look at sustainability. What we'll try to do is to prepare these individuals to go back to their respective communities armed with knowledge and skills to lead the efforts in working with black males throughout the country. So when they come to our campus, they're working with leaders here, with our faculty members here who lead sessions, and we have discussions. We also do some field placement where we actually we explore the community in trying to understand some of these issues from a first-hand basis as well.
Okay. And Wes, is this going on at other places in the United States? Is UofL just the latest that has picked up this Leaders in Residence initiative, or are we kind of the first ones to do this?
Well, it's unique in that the Campaign for Black Male Achievement does run other fellowships around the country, but what we've crafted at the University of Louisville is really like no other, because from the very beginning, the partnership with the University of Louisville was to create a framework that was sustainable and that could be replicable in other respective, geographies and in different universities. So what we're building here, we hope to place it in other places and take the framework to a national scale, really. And just to piggyback on what Dr. Cunningham said, we expose them to every facet of Louisville life, because Louisville is considered the epicenter for black male achievement. So for them to be here, it's really to have them in the nexus point of everything that's taking place around the country. All the work kind of filters through Louisville, and they're able to see that. They're getting executive coaching experience, sustainability pipeline development, and we're really just taking them to the next level of their leadership potential.
So what do they get out of the camp? I assume there's going to be a campus experience, for lack of a better term. You said they were going to be talking with UofL students and those kinds of things. So what did they gain, or what's the idea of what these black men from across the United States will gain from these leadership training courses, and also mingling and having conversations with community leaders in Louisville and with the students at the University of Louisville?
Well, what we hope to do is provide them with the skills that will allow them to really sharpen their work with these young individuals. It is important they are aware of the issues facing young black males in our country today. What are those issues? Educational issues, for instance, unemployment issues, crime in our community. They need to be aware of what those issues are. They also need to be aware of how to prepare these individuals for the future, for instance. So we need to look at technology. Where's technology going, for instance? What will happen in the future? How can we better prepare these individuals? How can we prepare them for the workforce in the future? What will jobs look like, 10, 15, 20 years from now? So the goal is to not only look at what is happening right now, but also look at the future and think of how we as individuals can prepare these young men to be better prepared for the future.
So go ahead.
And
Rob.
perhaps our contribution, along with what Dr. Cunningham stated, is the fact that on our campus, we are providing the academic instruction for the cohort. Nat Urban from our School of Business, along with Lyle Sussman, actually were the lead facilitators for that first on-site intensive on leadership development. We're going to also be featuring, if you will, other faculty members who will be implementing and addressing the curriculum, for us. This past for the first online intensive, we had Ron Crouch, and you may remember Ron from years ago, who was a former employee of the University of Louisville, who talked about the data.
The data centers, the Kentucky Data Center.
Yes, the Kentucky Data Center. So our U of L contribution is providing that level of faculty instruction, that would be going forward.
Wes, you want to chip in something there?
Yeah, I don't want us to get kind of hung up on the 10 number of the cohort, because some of these people are stewards over organizations that represent tens and thousands of people. For example, one of our fellows at Neil Austin in New York, his stewardship is over 100,000 students in the state of New York. So what we impart in him has direct implications on all the populations that he serves. And our cohort does have both men and women represented in it.
The halo effect.
It'll trickle down.
Absolutely.
So we do have 3 women.
Oh, you what?
We have 3 women in the cohort. So we have 7 men and 3 women.
Wait a minute. So it's called the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, but you've got women who are helping with black male achievement. I assume that's the...
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay.
Leaders in residence.
All right.
In recognition of Women's History Month, we have to acknowledge that black women have been a staple of sustainability in our community forever. So.
And these folks, are they the folks that are coming, the 10 that you have so far and that you hope to get in the future, is there an age limit? Are these young leaders in their communities, or are some of these folks, 50, 60 years old that are working with these young black males?
We've got an interesting mix, and I'm going to pass this because I know, pass this over to Wes, but we've got an interesting diversity of individuals in terms of age range and years of experience working, with the cohort. Wes, you care to...
The cohort represents some people with 2 years of experience in the field, up to 23 plus years in the field.
So you got some young folks and some
Absolutely.
old folks.
Yeah, a good mix.
Old like me and Ralph.
It's a good... Let's be kind. Season. I like the word season.
All right,
these days.
you're seasoned.
Okay.
All right. So when all this is done, they finish this 18-month course, and what comes out of it? What is there something that they have to do, like a video, or do they? What is something that will be the outcome of this?
We'll be capturing all their learnings throughout the process, and we'll produce a video archive of the work they've been actively writing. They'll be setting blog posts. They've asked to be transformed into a think tank to help other unique organizations with these same issues. So there will be a lot of tangible outcomes at the end of the process.
Okay. And bottom line for Henry and Ralph, what's the big deal for the University of Louisville to be hosting this? Why is it a big deal for U of L?
This is a big deal for the university because it brings us national attention. We have people from across the country, from Washington D.C., New York, North Carolina, New Orleans, Memphis, Tennessee. These are people who are coming to our campus who have been exposed to U of L and the expertise that U of L has to offer. So it brings us national attention. It also brings credibility to our university. This is also a recruiting tool for us as well, because these are individuals who come here, they see how great of a university we are, they take this word back, and it's a way for us to spread the word and possibly recruit students to come to the university.
Great way to showcase U of L, right, Ralph?
It's a great way to showcase U of L, and it clearly, Mark, is complementary to our metropolitan mission as an institution of higher education. So we think it's a win-win, and clearly, for us to be able at the end of the day to say that we have helped to make a difference in terms of addressing quality of life issues for young African American males going forward, we think is huge, to say the least.
Very good. Ralph Fitzpatrick, Henry Cunningham, Wes Tolbert. Appreciate you being on the show. Good luck with the program. Asthma may be more common than you think, and it's impacting older adults. Dr. Rodrigo Cavallazzi teaches in the School of Medicine in Pulmonary and Critical Care and has studied asthma and how to better diagnose it. Dr. Cavallazzi, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for having me here.
Sure. Welcome to the program. All right. Well, let's start right off the top and ask the most basic question. What is asthma? How do you describe it as a doctor?
Asthma is an inflammatory disease that is characterized by airflow obstruction, that is narrowing of the air pipes, that is intermittent, and it's an inflammation in the lungs. And the symptoms include shortness of breath, cough, chest tightness, and wheezing.
Okay. And you did a study, you did some research on better ways to detect asthma, right? So what did you study? What were you looking for? What were you trying to figure out?
Okay. In our study, we assessed a set of questions, the value of these questions to diagnose asthma in adults over 60 years old. Now, asthma is a clinical diagnosis. It is diagnosed by history and physical examination, but the diagnosis is confirmed by demonstrating variable airflow obstruction, which means that intermittent narrowing of the air pipe. The most commonly used test to diagnose variable airflow obstruction is called spirometry.
Called what?
Spirometry.
Spirometry. Okay, so that's what most folks, most doctors use to detect asthma now.
Yes, to confirm the diagnosis.
Gotcha.
With spirometry, we measure the lung volumes, and then we give a medication to dilate the air pipe, and we measure it again. In asthma, characteristically, the air pipes are going to be narrowed, and then there's going to be an improvement in this narrowing after you get the medication, the bronchodilator.
Right.
The problem is that most patients with established asthma do not have narrowing of the air pipe at the time they do the spirometry. So at the
time of the test, their air pipe is not narrowed, so the doctor can't say, "Hey, you got asthma."
Yeah. So the spirometry is a good test to confirm the diagnosis of asthma, but it's not good to rule out asthma. So in this study, we relied on an additional study called metacholine challenge test. In this test, the patient inhales a irritating substance, and serial measurements of the lung volumes are obtained. And if the patient has asthma, there's going to be a narrowing of the air pipe. And so we assessed a number of questions having the metacholine challenge test as the reference standard. This test, the metacholine challenge test, by the way, is available in clinical practice.
How do you say that? What is it?
Metacholine challenge test.
Metacholine cherish test?
Challenge.
Oh boy.
Challenge test.
Yeah, I'm glad you can say it. I'd have to see it. That's a tough name. Is it named after somebody, I'm assuming?
Oh, it's an irritating substance.
Okay.
Metacholine is so we challenge the patient by having the patient inhale this irritating substance.
Okay. All right. So you have them do this. So I guess the results of this study, did you find, and you were doing this just in older adults, folks over 60. So did you find that this was a better predictor and a better way to diagnose asthma in older folks?
The purpose of the study was not to assess the value of this test.
Okay.
We used this test as a reference standard. The purpose of the study was to evaluate the value of a number of questions that we asked the patient, during the history.
Okay.
And we came up with the question of the highest value was do you experience wheezing, chest tightness, or cough upon exposure to airborne triggers? And that was the question that had the highest value to predict asthma, having the metacholine challenge test as the reference standard.
Okay. So the best question was, and when you talk about, what did you say, irritants? What was the word you used?
Triggers, airborne triggers.
So airborne triggers would be what? Like pollution?
Dust,
or dust?
pollen, perfume smell,
allergy
cleaning
stuff.
Products.
Stuff that causes allergies.
Yeah.
All right. So you asked that question of folks that are 60 or older,
Yeah.
but wasn't there still a problem in trying to figure out, or perhaps, be able to diagnose that a person has asthma instead of COPD or some other illness? Is there still that problem with older folks that have been smoking, for instance, for a long time? And,
Yes.
So
Older patients, they tend to have more concomitant COPD, which is a condition largely caused by smoking. It is progressive and irreversible. They do have more concomitant COPD, but again, the key thing is to demonstrate this variable airflow obstruction when we did that through the metacholine challenge test. With COPD, what happens is that when you do the spirometry, there is fixed airway obstruction. So the lung volumes are decreased, and they do not improve substantially, or they do not normalize when they get the bronchodilator, the medication to dilate the air pipe.
Gotcha. We're talking with Dr. Rodrigo Cavallazzi, who teaches in the School of Medicine in Pulmonary and Critical Care. We're talking about asthma and how to better detect it, and how to better detect it in older adults who sometimes, can develop asthma as they get older, right? I mean,
Yes.
I don't have asthma right now, but there's a chance I could develop it as I get older, correct?
Yes. So the natural history of asthma varies a lot. First of all, asthma is a very common condition. The prevalence of asthma in the adult population is about 8.4%, 8%, I'm sorry, and in folks less than 18 years old is 8.4%. But the natural history varies a lot. For instance, you can develop asthma as a child, and then the asthma can improve during childhood and never come back. Or you can develop asthma as a child, the asthma could improve and come back in the adult life.
So you could lose it. So like when you're 5 years old, you may have asthma. It may go away till you're 26, but may come back later?
Yes, exactly. Or you can develop asthma as a child, and the asthma might persist throughout your life. On the other hand, there are some patients who have new onset asthma in their adult life and even as a senior. So some of my patients, sometimes they get even puzzled and perplexed. How come I have asthma? I never had asthma. But that happens. It could also happen that a patient had asthma as a child that was never really diagnosed and never really recognized.
Yeah, and you described what the symptoms are of asthma a little bit earlier. So what are they? Coughing, wheezing, what was the other?
Chest tightness and shortness of breath. Those are the cardinal symptoms of asthma. Now, I think it's important to say that asthma is often misdiagnosed in the primary care setting. Using rigorous tests, pulmonary function test, and then subsequent to that, metacholine challenge test. Very good research has shown that about a third of the patients in the community who are labeled to have asthma do not actually have asthma.
So they were misdiagnosed.
Yes. In addition to that, exactly. In addition to that, asthma is also underdiagnosed. So it's a tricky diagnosis. Those symptoms that we talked about, they are fairly non-specific. For instance, a patient may have heart failure, which tends to be more common as you get older, and heart failure can present with wheezing and shortness of breath, and that may be mistaken as asthma. You could have, for instance, gastroesophageal reflux disease, which typically manifests with heartburn, but the patient may not have heartburn and may have just cough as a result of the reflux, and that might also be misinterpreted as asthma. There's a condition called vocal cord dysfunction, which can present symptoms just like asthma.
Okay, so bottom line, what do you tell your patients when they walk in and they say, I'm having this coughing and wheezing, I don't feel too hot, but, I've been smoking all my life, I'm 60 years old, when you look at them, you say, well, we're going to check for asthma, but you may not have it, and I can't be too sure. What do you tell them?
No. I mean, we like to have a high level of certainty, but sometimes
well, yeah, you like to, but I mean,
but sometimes we don't. But if the patient is smoking, the first thing I tell the patient is you have to quit smoking because that's the most important thing. But sometimes you can have concomitant asthma and COPD. So in order to arrive to the diagnosis of asthma, first of all, we listen to the patient. Do you have symptoms when you're exposed to triggers? Do you have a lot of wheezing? Do you have symptoms at nighttime? And then we try to rule out other conditions. For instance, in the case of heart failure, do you have swelling of your legs? So a good history is important, a good physical examination, and be curious. It's very important that clinicians to be curious to get to the right diagnosis. But then we also do some specialized tests. We do spirometry with bronchodilator, and sometimes we make the diagnosis of asthma with that test, okay? Most of patients will have normal spirometry, most patients with asthma, and sometimes we move towards a metacolin challenge test. Or sometimes if the clinical history is highly suggestive of asthma, we may skip the metacolin challenge test.
Okay, very good. All right, Dr. Rodrigo Cavallazzi, I appreciate you being on the show. The first American Indians who roamed this country had their own unique languages. Do any of those languages still live on? Well, Karl Swinehart is an assistant professor of comparative humanities in the College of Arts and Sciences at UofL, and he's a linguistic anthropologist, if you will. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's
linguistic
right.
Anthropologist. Well,
Thanks.
Karl, welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
All right. What's a linguistic anthropologist? What do you do?
Well, anthropology is, this really ambitious field of trying to understand humanity, and clearly a big part of any human endeavor has to do with language, right? People use language in all corners of their life. So linguistic anthropologists study communication and cultural contexts. Part of what linguistic anthropologists have done for a long time is document languages, and that's sort of related to this topic
that's what
here.
You do. All right. So you took a look, and you've studied and you've taken a look at American Indian languages over the years, and whether those are still happening, whether those are still being used out there. So what have you found?
Well, my research has mostly been in a country that is actually majority Native American, but American in the sense of the Americas, right? The whole hemisphere. And my research has been in Bolivia over the last 13 years. And in Bolivia, the majority of the population is native, right? So languages like Aymara and Quechua, which are Native American languages native to the Andes, are spoken by millions of people.
Okay.
But even there, there's a fear and an anxiety among people who speak Aymara and Quechua that the languages are being lost. You can think to languages like Irish or Welsh in Europe. Only 100 years ago, they had millions of speakers, and today there's very few. It's sometimes less a question of the sheer number of speakers than about the question of generational transmission, right? If children stop speaking the language, a language doesn't exist outside of people speaking it and using it.
Right. Well, you mentioned in the notes you sent to me that in 2019, UNESCO is the Year of the Indigenous Languages. What's the Year of Indigenous Languages? What does that mean?
So UNESCO, promotes culture and education, and as part of one of its main sort of charges is to promote the maintenance and revitalization of human patrimony. And language is absolutely a part of that. And so when I mention things like languages like Irish and Welsh being lost in Europe, or the fear of Aymara and Quechua speakers that their grandchildren won't be speaking Aymara and Quechua anymore, this is part of a loss of human patrimony, right? That if there's a huge wealth of knowledge in languages that has developed over millennia, right? And if that's lost, that's really something humanity can't really get back.
Right. All right. Again, we're talking with Karl Swinehart, who's an assistant professor of comparative humanities in the College of Arts and Sciences at UofL, and he's a linguistic anthropologist. All right. Well, let's talk about the United States. How you said, or I think you have said, that a number of states have some Indian language for their basis.
Yeah.
How many states have?
Well, it's astounding. Almost half of all the names of states, of our 50 states in the United States, 24 have names that come from native languages. So Kentucky, like Tennessee and Ohio, these are names that actually come from Mohawk or Iroquoian languages. So Kentucky apparently comes from the Mohawk word for fields, gendage. When after the Beaver Wars, that this was part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. This was a place where Mohawk folks would come down and hunt in the fields in the Ohio River Valley. So Illinois, Michigan, Arkansas, these come from Algonquian languages.
All right, so they all have a basis in some Indian tribe from way back when, right?
Well, way back when and also today, right? There are still Mohawk people, and there are still, speakers of Algonquian languages. It's not just the past. This is an important point.
Right, and that's what we want to talk about. So Native American languages, over the years, have they totally dissolved, or are there still Native Americans out there speaking some form and some words of their languages?
Sure. There absolutely are still speakers of Native American languages. It's there's something like 150 Native American languages still spoken in the United States. But of those, the vast majority are spoken by very few people, sometimes fewer than 100 people. The largest languages include Navajo, which has hundreds of thousands of speakers, Lakota or Sioux. These languages have thousands of speakers still.
How about in Kentucky? Do you have any Iroquois languages or those kinds of things in Kentucky still being spoken?
Excellent question. So here in Kentucky, in the southeast corner of the United States, these are states that are sometimes called removal states. So just last week marked 180 years since the last Cherokee survived the genocidal Trail of Tears, right? So in 1839, there was the removal of the Cherokee.
We're talking 180 years.
180 years ago. But the descendants of the Cherokee, which number towards 1 million of tribally affiliated, registered Cherokee, I think something like 800,000, still recognize that day, right? And so this is, Kentucky is one of these places where people were removed at gunpoint through violence. And so unfortunately, in one way, no, right? What we have left are the names of parks in this city: Cherokee, Shawnee, and Iroquois,
Seneca,
which have to do actually with people who were on this land. If you go across the river to the falls of the Ohio's sort of visitor center, there's an exhibit there where there's recordings of Shawnee being spoken by people who now live in Oklahoma, right? So there are speakers of Shawnee, there are speakers of Cherokee, absolutely, but largely living outside of Kentucky.
Like you said, probably just a few folks, right? Not.
No. There's tens of thousands of speakers of Cherokee, and there's many people who are learning Cherokee and sort of taking up the charge and trying to have programs in schools.
Bring back their heritage kind of thing.
Yes, and so also in North Carolina, I know there's a pretty vibrant and dynamic Cherokee education program. Yes, yeah, for children in schools, right. In the Smoky Mountains.
We're talking with Karl Swinehart, who's an assistant professor of comparative humanities in the College of Arts and Sciences at UofL. Why is it important from your perspective that these languages live on? Or is it important that these languages live on?
Well, because when you're talking about a language, it's not just, there are reasons to think about the language as important, just as I was saying, just for its own status as sort of a human patrimony. But languages don't exist outside of networks of people and communities, right? So any place where languages have stop being spoken, usually it's part of a bigger process, right? Where families have been torn apart, communities have been disrupted in different ways. So the language is sort of one part of a bigger whole that usually there's some kind of reparation that needs to happen, right, within a community where there's been disruption and violence. But I think that second question also, speaking as a linguist, I think both things are important at the same time, right? Because it's true that there's a tremendous amount of the world, and just, again, I'm an anthropologist. I'm interested in all the different ways that we can understand humanity in this world, and there's a tremendous amount of knowledge in different languages.
But like you said, it's kind of a symptom of a greater thing that American Indians being separated and moving into towns and not being together. So that's what's broken some of the language apart, right?
Sure.
How many are still speaking the native language in the United States? Ballpark.
In around 350,000, I think. Something around there, and that's a fraction of the nearly 3 million American Indians living in the country.
Okay, Karl Swinehart, interesting stuff. Thanks for listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert, and go Cards.